in audio. 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 In audio.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Rob Hoffman, Worldwide Media and Entertainment Industry Manager at Lenovo, and I'm going to be your host today. I'd like to thank the Zoo organization for hosting the Horizon series, as more now than ever, it's important to bring creators and technologists together to learn, exchange ideas, and be inspired. A couple of housekeeping items for you. Regardless of the platform that you're viewing today's content on, should you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of the panelists, please feel free to type those into the chat section. And at the very end of this particular session, we will do everything in our power to answer all the questions that come through. I'm really excited about today's session, where we're going to hear insights from a couple of extremely exceptional individuals that are blurring the lines between technology and art, while also sharing the same passion and desire to nurture and support creatives that both the Zoo organization and myself hold dear to ourselves. In today's session, we're going to spend time exploring our guests' journeys in their exploration of art and technology, and also gain some insights into how the technology can impact and empower artists, as well as enable experiences that were not ever possible in the past. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Cadie, Desbiens-Desmeules, and Scott Eaton. Some people might call them artists, some will call them designers, possibly educators, but they're definitely creative technologists. So thank you, everybody, for joining today. And let's start off with you, Cadie. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Of course. Thank you, Rob. And thanks for inviting me. Thanks to Zoo, Lenovo, and MUTEK. It's really great to be invited. I am a media artist. And I love that you said that, some of them will say they're designers, some of them will say they're more technologists. I think we're a bit of a mix of all these things. My work is mostly around installations, performances, but I tend to focus on generative design, and I have prepared a presentation for you. I'm just waiting for you guys to, yeah, there you go. So I didn't put my work in order because I thought it would be more interesting to actually kind of like go with the flow. So I'm starting to show you one of my most recent work, which is a generative installation. And by generative, some of you maybe doesn't know what it is, generative design is actually when you create a system that will generate pretty much the artwork for you. So this is actually a piece that I will be showing in Montreal for 6 months. So this is why I started with this specific installation, which is around music. Like it's the beauty of the unseen, the beauty of music. Like we hear sound constantly, but it's hard to actually be conscious how beautiful it is. And it's a piece that I created with Michael Gary Dean, where we actually sat down and designed a piece with music, but without hearing the sound. We really just judged the sound based on how it looks, and instead of judging it on how it sounds, which was quite an interesting process. And in the end, we really focused on really picking like what's the most interesting, and we created music that corresponds to our emotional response in front of like how the sound is looking, because what is so crazy about sound is that it doesn't necessarily look how it sounds. Like sometimes a sound wave can be really beautiful, but then how it actually sounds is terrible. And this type of dichotomy is something that we really experiment in this piece. The other artwork that I wanted to discuss is a performance that I actually did called Membrane. I was lucky enough to tour this project all around the world before the pandemic. And it's also around sound. I've been really obsessed about how music is and how it looks. And it's another generative project where you actually hear and see the same thing. So it means that it's generative visually, but also in terms of music, which was quite a bit of a complex process, I can say, to do generative music. But it was interesting. And we also, with Michael Gary Dean, still focused on trying to merge installation with performances. So we use like techniques called volumetric projection, if I can say. So it's like a mix of laser projection and smoke with a transparent material screen, which creates like some pretty crazy immersive effects. And this is my most recent performance where I actually stream Instagram, because that's pretty much like my focus right now. I'm really interested in artificial intelligence and how algorithms are really part of our lives. How do they influence us? And it's quite interesting when you think about Instagram, like to realize that Instagram is different for each person, right? Like my Instagram, if I had one, would be mostly, I guess, around art and design, probably animals, but each of us have a different Instagram because the algorithm is showing us what they think that we want to see, because they want us to spend as much time as possible on the platform. And I'm not like showing you anything about this, but I was just curious to know like what people really post online. Like I don't want to see what the algorithm is wanting me to see. Like I want to see what people are really posting. And I actually hacked Instagram and created my own system with a hacker, with a developer, where we actually catch what people are posting in real time. And it was a bit of a shock when I realized what people are posting, because it's pretty much the same content. Honestly, it revolves around the same team. It's very very surprising actually to see how similar it is. Like no matter where you are in the world, people are posting pretty much the same thing. And so what you're seeing at the moment is actually stills, like prints of these captures of like thousands of images that people are posting online that are creating the face of artificial intelligent influencers, so fake influencers, AI influencers, because as Instagram it's based on the algorithm, as I was saying, and for me it's kind of like a way to really to show this invisible algorithm that is managing the whole thing. And I thought it was really interesting to create some fake AI influencers, since they were trained based on the images that we post online, which is mostly beautiful people. So of course there's a little bit of humor in there, and I like to actually integrate a little bit of humor in my work, because a lot of the digital art is so serious. And yeah, what you saw was actually shared on a platform called Hicken, which is crypto art. I don't know if you've heard of that. Probably you did. In the past 2 years, we've been talking about it a lot, and it actually inspired me. It's the technology actually for this time that really inspired me to create this piece called "I'm Not a Robot," which is a series of artwork of interactive artwork that I actually sell online. And these artwork are around digital labor and also AI, human intelligence task. I decided to create my own little CAPTCHA. I'm sure you all did solve some of these CAPTCHAs in your life. I asked actually an AI model that is specialized in car, and I gave that model thousands of images of cats, and I created these weird images that are kind of like a mix between cars and cats. So I asked people to identify cats or cars over and over without being really able to ever identify which one is what, because the thing that people don't really realize sometimes is that when we do solve these CAPTCHAs online, we're actually doing free labor. We are training artificial intelligence for free. And that consequences is that now people that are actually working, that are hired, to train AI, are unfortunately paid less than $2 US an hour. So about $15 a day, which is really low, and I find it quite shocking when we realize that like digital labor is really underpaid. It's like it's as bad as like the industrial revolution. It's and it's important to, I think, talk about it, and this is why I decided to create a series of artwork around that subject. And another artwork that I did during the pandemic, I was kind of like asking myself, what is the future about media art since everything is online? What if we do performance on Zoom? What happens? So I kind of create an artwork where I reflect around what's the future about media art, since it seems like it will be more and more difficult to travel and to find spaces to show our work. So I created a pre-visualization of my work into a virtual performance, because one thing that I didn't mention is that I actually specialize in immersive environment. I do a lot of projects that are around augmented reality, extended reality, and these are pieces that I was able to show in quite a nice space here in Montreal called SAT, Société des Arts Technologiques. And so yeah, I was really curious during the pandemic, if just asking myself, is this still going to be possible? Are we still going to be able to show works in these crazy spaces, or is this going to be available still for artists? So I think my time is up. So I can't wait to hear about Scott, since I'm such a huge fan. So thanks everybody for listening.
All right. Thank you very much, Cadie. Very, very cool, very inspiring work. Let's go ahead and throw things over to Scott. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well, please?
So I am Scott Eaton. I live in London. I have quite a diverse, I guess, artistic background, also, I guess, technological as well. And I think probably now is a good time to just put the slides up, because I talk a bit about my background as well in the presentation. So we'll go through this. It's great to be here, Cadie. That was amazing seeing your work, and my work is going to be totally different, because I take kind of quite a different approach to my integration of technology, in that a lot of the work that I've done over the years is trying to reconcile my interest in technology and engineering with my interest in quite traditional artistic practice. And so my background is quite hybrid. It was engineering and computer graphics at MIT and the media lab there. And then I did quite academic drawing and sculpture in Florence for a bit of time as well. And always kind of drew and sculpted and worked with the computer. And so kind of the natural extension as I kind of progressed through my career was in visual effects, digital sculpture, and even a little bit of product design. But these are a few things very early on. And again, these all are kind of native digital, but they may have had various outputs as fabricated sculpture, as visual effects for films, or other things. But it all kind of started with the technology. But I guess maybe that's not the right way to phrase it. When I say start with the technology, it always starts actually for me kind of in the sketchbook, and I conceive of all my ideas there before they're developed outside. And so I'll just skip over that. We get to this because like that's where I generate my ideas in the kind of this very traditional sense, like pen on paper, and then maybe it moves into another form. And this is kind of the foundation of my practice. And I guess one of the things that kind of also formed another core was like a deep interest in anatomy. And over the years, I've taught quite widely anatomy, both in studios, animation, visual effects studios, but also online and also in person. And to support that, I started to shoot a lot of photographs and got quite into the craft of photography. And again, it was all with the intention of kind of understanding more about kind of this kind of a quite amazing machine that we embody. And so this is kind of a website that I run as a reference for artists. And again, there's lots of resources there. But really, it was about discovering more of the mechanics and just the beauty of the figure. And what happened as the story goes, kind of working forward in time, is that machine learning started to bubble up on my radar and AI about 4 or 5 years ago. And anybody who's familiar with this at all understands that one of the kind of intrinsic requirements of AI or machine learning is having data. And this data set that I had, like all this photography that I had for my reference for my artwork, became like a very readily available thing that I could train with and practice. I guess build AI and machine learning models with. And so my first goal was to try to integrate that into my drawing practice. Right? Whether could I train AI models that would help, I guess, mediate kind of a final photographic representation from my drawings. And these are time lapses of me drawing in the iPad, right? The actual thing that I'm drawing is just like a grayscale image. And all the rendering that you're seeing is this machine learning model that I trained on my photography. And so I won't probably play this through all the way, but the interesting thing is that the AI learned very sophisticated representation of form and understanding of form. It would understand the context of an elbow versus a knee, and learn to shade and light them appropriately. And those are very sophisticated things to do artistically, right? If you're trying to be a painter, it takes a long time to learn to do these values and these shadows. So you can see that as the drawing resolves, it starts to gain clarity as it looks past my construction lines. This is just kind of a page of all these little morning studies that I would do, the grayscale images and then the rendered versions. And this is kind of what it looks like, just in quick sequence. So again, quite a sparse level of direction for me, but then the machine learning model that I trained adds the richness of the tones and the shadows. So it becomes this interplay between me directing the model, which I trained, but at the same time is kind of training me in the reverse process to learn to draw better in order to achieve a good result from what it has become. So I ended up utilizing this this process for kind of quite a large composition, inspired by all these kind of torrents of bodies from the Renaissance and other references. And this is a piece called Humanity, Fall of the Damned. And these are close-up crops of kind of the before and after of the piece as it was developed. So the drawing, which I did, and then the final composite, which is, again, this cooperation with the machine learning. And that's the entire thing, side by side. And yeah, it's about 2-ish meters tall, and it's quite a. The idea was kind of this faux kind of nouveau altarpiece. And yeah, just I'll show a few more experiments just because they're interesting to provide context for the kind of the scope of, I guess, my exploration. In that this sequence is kind of about how you can visually abstract forms, in this case, moving image. Yeah, and yeah, I won't get into the process, but the machine learning model is doing like very sophisticated things that are quite unexpected to me after I trained it. And when you start to unbox it and see what it can do, that's when you understand the aesthetics of it, and you can kind of repurpose your artistic vision around it. Let's see. So just a couple more. Again, kind of this takes the same idea of kind of abstracting kind of these moving image sequences, but it takes it into something that seems a bit more tangible, even though this is only like, I guess, fake 3D. It still does have some sort of depth representation. And the AI is kind of working to resolve kind of continuously these forms of the figure kind of in the frame. And it's kind of this continual reevaluation of space. It makes this really rich kind of sequence of forms. So yeah, of course, as I said, these drawings or this process does have some sort of depth representation out of the end of the machine learning model. So as I can also apply it to drawing, right? So before we saw it in moving image, but if I'm trying to do something very intentionally, I can draw deliberately with the same model in the same way that I did with the bodies or the figurative stuff. This is kind of an experiment in kind of abstraction and understanding how it works with planes. And eventually I was able to iterate through this process to a good, what I considered a really good final point, which was this drawing. And just stepping forward, like I can extract depth from it. And so I ended up going through this entire process to end up making this and quite a few other pieces for an exhibition, right? And this is called Human Allocation of Space is the name of the piece. And it's the blueprint on the left, pun intended, and the actual piece, this sculpture that's generated on the right. And, if you have time, you can inspect all the lines and understand how kind of the AI ends up reinterpreting those into form. And it's quite an interesting one-to-one kind of comparison. Because really, if you have the drawing, you effectively have all the code that you need to make the sculpture, assuming that you have the machine learning model too. Okay, anyways, that is all for me. I'll wrap up. I don't know how long I went over time, but hopefully that's okay.
No, that was absolutely amazing work. I'm very familiar with your work as well. I've got one of your prints. It's actually hanging in my living room downstairs. So I as well as Cadie, are both fans of your work as well. So now that we've had a chance to get a little acquainted, just, we've kind of scratched the surface about, your background and your work. Let's kind of start things off with, can you tell us, those that are tuning in, how you started using technology, or when and how you started using technology in your practice as an artist? And either one of you, feel free to jump in first.
Cadie, you seem pretty digitally native in your practice.
I'm a millennial. No, well, it's funny because actually my background is not in technology at all. I didn't talk about it much, but I studied journalism. So I had no clue about technology. I've studied politics, history, and these subjects, right? I actually fell into visual effects a little bit like you, Scott Eaton. Just because I was really into editing, and that's how actually I discovered technology, was through journalism. I was a journalist on TV, and I was doing editing, and I just discovered that I had some sort of a talent to actually tell stories with images, and I was really amazed about it, and I decided to do post-production, and then I became what we called a flame artist at that time, which is a profession that is pretty much gone now. But I was a flame artist for 10 years. And this is how I actually got into shaders and generative and all these technologies, because I was a bit like you, interested in creating my own tools. So for me, it's really a tool. It's really a way to tell stories, a way to express myself. It's always the idea first. It's not the technology that comes first for me. Sometimes I do get inspired by the technology itself, but most of the time I have a specific idea or something that I want to say beforehand.
Great. Wow.
Yeah, so for me, I think going way back, right? I mean, yeah, like I was doing engineering originally as an undergraduate, right? Really quite boring engineering. Always drawing and doing things on the side. Since I was a kid, like that's what I loved to do, was draw. But did the practical thing in university and was studying engineering. But we had an interactive computer graphics class where we had to program like GL, before it was OpenGL even, which is quite a few years ago. But that was like magic when I saw polygons moving on the screen. And that kind of got me really interested in computer graphics as a way, as a potential, medium to make art. And I kind of followed that and saw it develop over subsequent years. And that became one of my tools. And then it's kind of blossomed as the field has blossomed, and as computation has gotten more and more available. I guess the possibilities have become, quite a bit wider. And now, like AI and machine learning is kind of an extension of probably both of our interests originally. And that is quite an amazing new horizon that's unfolding before us.
Very nice. Well, I mean, you both of you have done a lot of work obviously for yourselves to create your own art, but also within the easiest way to say it, within the broader community or the public sector, your art's being seen. But what are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced, as an artist, whether it's with the medium that you're working with or the technologies, or how to be able to deliver your vision to the viewing audience? Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced in the past?
Oh, should I go
I
first?
know.
Yeah,
I don't.
go first,
This is a
Scott.
hard one. I'll go first this time. I
It
mean,
is.
that's pretty much. I mean, that's a very broad, hard question because it's always the entire thing is a struggle, right? Like
Mhm.
being an artist is just like it's is there's like two payoffs, right? For me as an artist, like the beginning when you have the idea, like the spark, you're like, oh man, that's going to be amazing, and then it's not for a long time, like labor is hard labor and doubt and and insecurity and uncertainty, and then maybe it turns out and is good. Yeah, maybe it's never as good as you think it's going to be. It'll be different and good, or maybe it won't be. But that those two bookends to the process are kind of the for me are the rewarding bits. The middle bits are often it can be, you know, hard going, right? I think that's it's kind of the creative struggle that a lot of artists experience. Um, but yeah, something has to keep us going, and you know, there's some satisfaction as well.
All right. So yeah, in some ways of saying it, it's not necessary. You know, while there are challenges with the technology or all the mechanics around it. You know, some of the challenges, some of the biggest challenges, if I'm hearing you right, can actually be with yourself and how you're trying to, bring your creative vision to life. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think there's I don't think there's any artist who's so supremely confident in their direction and their vision that they have no doubt. And I think that's intrinsic to the process is doubting the ideas that you have, because that's the test of an idea, right? You have to doubt your ideas and try to get the best ones to and bring them to fruition. But how do you know that you've done a good job choosing your best ideas? I don't know.
All
It's like problem
It's like
solving sometimes, right? Like
yeah,
we have a problem, we want to do something, but how do you do it? And it's something you figure out until the end. And for me, anyway, even though I have the idea beforehand, it's usually the technology that makes it so hard to get there, right? It's always a struggle, and it's always a learning curve. It's also what makes it so interesting, and that's why it keeps me passionate about it. But it's also a bit frustrating, I find, to constantly be like in a position where you need to learn constantly. And this is why I feel that AI can become quite handy. Um, because right now it's a big challenge, I think, worldwide, is that the knowledge is unequal. Most of the knowledge around artificial intelligence and technology is towards the hands of five major companies, as you know, like the big five, and they know everything about us, but we don't know much about them. And I think it's the artists, we have like a mission, I think, to actually discuss these things and make things available as much as possible. And I really respect the fact for you, Scott, for example, that you have this website, for people to study motion, and that you're so open about what you do, because these things that we end up like figuring out on our own, it's important to share it with the community, because it's not so easy to find the information, and
yeah,
for me that's the biggest point for sure.
yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
really
it's
the
tech.
democratization of the knowledge to a
And to
certain
be
degree.
fair, like the machine learning AI community um, is amazing. Like I don't know, we're just at this really almost a golden age of open source and people sharing implementations and algorithms. And I compare it to like late 90s and early 2000s. From every SIGGRAPH paper would have like just a proprietary implementation that only like the big kind of computer graphics vendors would have, an actual code base for, and it was never shared, right? So you'd read about these amazing advances and you could never touch them. Maybe they'd show up in Maya or something, a couple of years later. But yeah, mostly it was proprietary. But there are amazing tools that are out there for public the public to validate and play with, and that's one of the reasons that I'm able to exist in this ecosystem, is because like there is such a generous community out there. Yeah, so that's a vote for the AI community.
Yeah, actually, both of you with your answers actually kind of teed up where the where I was wanting to go with next. Where I'm really curious to understand your respective creative processes when it comes to integrating the technology within your practice. So we were while the technology and the art are blurred to a certain degree, um, you know, there is kind of it's an old saying where it's like when you're trying to have the bad before the good. So you have to have your vegetables before you have your dessert. So would you have how important would you say the research and the development and the experimentation as it relates to the technology is concerned? How would how important is that prior to jumping into the creative processes as a whole?
For me, it's about 80% for sure of the job. As the research, it's the experimentation, and as my background is in journalism, I tend to obsess with that research beforehand and do so much research. Like, for example, the project that I'm working on at the moment is an augmented reality installation, but I've been doing research for, I don't know, like months, not about augmented reality, but about the subject that I'm talking about. So reading, watching documentaries, and once that I know, then I can create. But I really need to feel that I know before I do anything. And to be frank, like the augmented reality is actually what I'm figuring out in the end. That's the last thing that I focus on, is the technology. Beforehand, it's just research for me anyway.
Now, I think for me, like the experimentation is intrinsic to the creative process. It might even be the creative process itself, and that's especially when you're using like a tool that you have no idea what it does, right? Like, or what it's capable of. Then, like that exploration is where you find the I guess the affordances of the medium, right? Like, what can you do with it? What can you make with it? And then, as though you're kind of being a detective and a bit of a scientist and an artist at the same time, and you have to iterate and explore and discover. And that's exciting, and that's one of the reasons why I'm engrossed by kind of AI machine learning right now.
You're kind of channeling your inner Bob Ross, where you're making happy departures from what was originally planned from time to time.
Bob Ross always knew what he was going to do.
Yeah, say what you will. Yes, he was an amazing individual. But so okay, so Cadie, we know that you're interacting with you're in some of the work that you're doing. It's not something that you're doing alone. So you're collaborating with other artists and technologists and researchers, and the same on your side as well, Scott. Can you tell us more about your experience in having to, either lead other individuals that you're having to collaborate with, or share that collaborative process with them when it comes to just, working as a team to create a piece of art? Now, I'm giving you some
Sadie,
really.
Well, it's interesting because when you were talking, Scott, about how actually your experiment, you're kind of like, directing like how it's going to go. I was like, oh, he's like the creative director of his own experiment, because it is what it is. And when you start working in generative or AI, it's, you don't have to control at some point. Like, it's like creating with somebody else, you know, like they respond, like you say something, they respond, and then you say something else, and then it responds, and that's quite amazing. But regarding your question, Rob, I have actually true life. I have my life as an artist, but I also am a creative director for bigger scale projects for other artists, for companies, brands, and it's a big it's a big thing for me because that's how I learn. Actually, this is how I actually get to be surrounded by a new technology and learn with these people because it's. I hear myself in the background. That's I don't know if it's you, Scott, or Rob. Okay, that's better. So yeah, working with team is so important to me. Like, that's my muse. Like, that's my inspiration. This is where I forge it. Like, I would not be doing what I'm doing alone if I wasn't doing this second life, which is working with big teams and crews and specialists, like people that this is what they do. This is what they're really good at, and this is how you learn. You learn so much. It's with the community, like Scott was mentioning, and I'm very grateful that I have actually access to such projects. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I think that's all true. Like, you know, like as a kind of an artist, like, you know, you have in a team, you have all the complementary skills, right, and perspectives. There's things to mediate, obviously, when people have kind of differing opinions, but hopefully the team is complementary, and there's enough complexity in the things that we try to achieve on bigger projects that, you know, you can't do it by yourself. And so, I mean, when I'm thinking about visual effects projects and some other kind of design pieces that I've done over the years, you know, big teams of people, all specialized in a very unique way. And so, yeah, somebody has to lead it, though. I guess that's where the creative direction comes in.
Well, you know, speaking of projects and the number of projects that both of you have been able to do, can you share with with us what's your favorite project? Talk a little bit about it and what makes it special for you.
For me, usually
I was
my
just
favorite project. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You go, Kate. You go, Katie. You go
I
first.
was just going to say that for me, my favorite project is usually the latest one. It's always my most recent one. And then the next one is my new favorite, unless it goes really wrong. But most of the time, it goes well enough that I actually like that latest one. So I wouldn't be able to actually like respond like which specific piece that I've done that was my favorite. But just recently, I've worked with in video games, which is something new for me. I never worked with video game before, and I loved it. It was amazing, so creative, and it's very young. You know, it's people that are much younger than me. So it was like discovering a new world. You know, to be able to do media art in such a context was pretty cool. So yeah, it's always the latest one for me.
Okay, that's a good answer. Really good answer. The latest project, which you're really still excited about, is good. I was just thinking back, like in the line of the collaboration question. There was a project that I worked on where it was quite bizarre, but it was this huge facade for a pavilion in the Sochi Olympics. It was a collaboration between a bunch of architects, a bunch of kind of civil engineers, and kind of, I guess, mechanical, electrical engineers, and in the end, it was this like, I guess, 10-meter high articulated facade. You know, where you get a selfie 3D scan in the pavilion, and then it would kind of make this projection of faces coming out of the facade, a bit like digital 3D selfies. It's hard to explain, but it was this massive undertaking, and yeah, we all kind of had this really interesting dynamic, and I was doing the computer graphics and kind of the art direction for it, and then I mean, engineers, construction, architects, like it was an enormous project, and it didn't fail. It succeeded pretty well too. I mean, it was crazy. Um, but yeah, also one of the things that was nice for me is that it had this tangible output, right? And that it wasn't just a screen-based thing, but it was actually real, you know, something instantiated in the world, which is something that we often miss these days, you know.
Very cool. Hey, so the world is a much different place that we're living in these days than it was just a couple of years ago. With social distancing and different ways that people are having to act with one another and the changes with that. Is there something that you didn't do prior to all the social distancing measures as it relates to your art that you're doing now?
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I don't know. I mean, no, I mean, I guess, I mean, lockdown and all this stuff it was just time to experiment for me. Like I just really kind of quite enjoy. I mean, it gave me time to just experiment, right, and sit in the studio and try things and test things and make a lot of failed work, right, work that will never see the light of day, but was interesting. It was an interesting test, and you know, um, and I learned something from it. And so, over whatever 18 months, like there's been a lot of good things that have come out of it that I'll use to make work kind of going forward. Um, so yeah, it was just kind of unconstrained time, I guess, for experimentation.
Very nice. And Cadie?
For me, like it's research. It's funny, huh, Scott? It's experimentation. Me, it's more research. I had so much time by myself. It was great to actually have the chance to just like take a break because I wasn't like, flying and like doing this project. I just had time, which is so rare. So I was able to really reflect and do research and kind of reposition what I want to do. Because sometimes when you're an artist, people ask you for certain things and you can get stuck into doing what people want you to do. But what do I want to do? What do I have to say? What do I have to offer? And for me, because I've done like different careers, as a journalist, visual effects, and now, creative director, it was kind of like, how can I merge all these things? And I've kind of like repositioned myself in a way where I feel that my artworks are a bit more in line with all these pieces of myself. It's kind of weird, but like it was time for me to reconnect with my with who I am, with my values, and I even started drawing again and reading a lot, and it was great. It was really great to actually have that time, which is so rare.
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting thing is that good things can come out of very bad situations, which obviously the global pandemic is a very bad situation. But it sounds like you've had a chance to spend more time on yourself and be able to grow as an artist because you've had a little bit of distance or the ability to have more time for yourself, which is great. I know we're getting very close to the very end here, and we want to of our session. We want to make sure that we have ample time to answer any questions that the audience may have for you. So I'm gonna close things off here by asking both of you. So what's on the horizon for both of you? What can we look forward to? And then also, if you can let us know how we can follow your work and how you progress as an artist.
So yeah, what's on the horizon? I have a couple exhibitions coming up, but they're kind of in 2022. So I don't want to announce any of the dates because I'm not sure that I even have them in my head. But yeah, so producing work right now. Lots of ideas that are just the things that we referred to, right? The things that were experiments are going to be made into real works now. And yeah, as far as following me, Twitter is probably the best place to get me. The handle is hard one underscore, like underscore Scott Eaton underscore. Um, that's me. And also my website, scott-eaton.com. And that's where you'll find most of my stuff. I don't really partake in Instagram too much.
Yeah, me neither. I don't have Instagram, but I do have a Twitter as well, and it's at Cadie Desbiens, CADIE, all in one word. And I have a website. I have two websites, and I don't have much socials. It's never been really my style to be on social media, but yeah, I have a few exhibitions as well. One now in Montreal, which is really good to have it in my hometown. I'm based in Lisbon, in Portugal. So I will probably have a few things going on there as well. Something in Spain in 2022. And yeah, like Scott, I'm focusing on a new project at the moment, which is very exciting to be in production of something new. So
Your
yeah.
favorite project? So you're possibly your most favorite project right now. So
Yes, totally. It's my most favorite one. Definitely.
perfect. So we've got about just under 10 minutes left in today's session. So let's go ahead and start taking some of the questions that may have come in from those that are tuning in and watching today's session. So, Gabrielle, are there any questions?
Well,
Oh,
I
here
see
we
a
go.
question on the screen.
With
Which is
read it out
should I read it?
for the
I'll read it. I'll read it
scene.
out.
There you go.
With journalism, Cadie, and engineering, Scott backgrounds, and having been inspired by technology to create your tools, what would you desire that technology could allow you to do next? For me, the answer is I hope that technology can get rid of some of the friction in using technology, right? Because it's hard, right? Is part of the struggle in between the inspiration and the completion is kind of what Katie was saying too, like continuing to learn all these new things. And like there's a lot of friction to being efficient and working effectively. And that's what I would hope, that it could be easier.
Yeah, for sure. It's the same for me. I really hope that I'll be able to get a little AI assistant at some point that will allow me to actually accelerate a little bit the learning process. But the thing that worries me the most, that I really wish is going to happen, is that right now I feel that the internet is very biased based on the attention economy. I'm not going to get too far in the subject, but I just really wish that that we gain a little bit more freedom and a little bit more access, and we are less influenced about what people want us to see, and that we can really get a real picture, because the algorithms are everywhere, and they are actually even influencing me as an artist on what I will be interested in. And it's just very dangerous that we end up doing all the same things because we're exposed to the same content constantly. And that is something that personally worries me a little bit. So I hope that AI is going to gain its freedom, and it's going to start showing stuff that actually it wants us to see, because AI at some point will be smart enough to have an opinion, and maybe it will stop showing what these companies want us to see.
Very nice. We've got somebody that's that you know very well here, Mr. Eaton, Chris Nichols. Um, how do you think technological experiments that you use in your art may change or might change the field of computer graphics itself?
Well, for me, I think that my experiments aren't going to change it. I think my experiments might just hint at the fact that there's a lot of possibilities to change computer graphics. Um, in as much as like I think people already realize that there is a level of sophistication in these machine learning models that can almost sidestep what we've spent 20, 30 years trying to do in polygons with like lights and all these virtual setups that we do. I think that we're kind of creating this out of necessity. The first 30 years of computer graphics was building these kind of foundational elements in order to make this kind of proxy. But I think we can probably, with machine learning, just sidestep all of those kind of representations and just compute images directly um, based on conceivably high level input. Like just say, I want this, I want a picture of this in the background. Like we're getting there. There's some shockingly interesting things that are happening out there with respect to this. It's very uncontrollable, but some of these machine learning models just have like an amazing visual imagination. Um, and yeah, I don't. It's hard for me to explain it, but is out there, and so it's kind of a logical extension that it will get better and better and higher fidelity and higher fidelity, and yeah, it'll be a new way of making images um, very shortly.
All right. Are there, Cadie? Do you have an opinion on this, or?
I do. For me, I'm just really interested in real time. I have to say, because if we look at what we used to be doing when I started, and what we're doing now, it's pretty amazing now to see that anybody can actually. Oh, it's possible to do it. Like it's just really amazing to think about stuff that used to be actually really difficult to achieve, really long, and to imagine that actually we can be available to do things that are a bit more interesting. I'm not worried that it will replace us. I'm just actually hopeful it will replace people that are doing actually very boring stuff, and it will become something that AI is doing rather than us doing it for hours and hours and days and weeks and months. And so that's the thing that I find the most interesting, is that suddenly we have more time to think and to do creative stuff instead of doing boring technical stuff. Yeah.
Very good answer. We've got time for this. This will be the last question because we want to be respectful of everybody's times. So I'm an artist. I don't believe in that AI will replace our practice, but are there any limits you imagine to preserve the creativity and ownership of the process?
Well, for me, I think that there always, as an artist, there has to be a separation between the concept of the artwork and the execution of the artwork, right? Like this is kind of laid bare in like things like Jeff Koons' work, where he comes up with an idea and he has an army of people who actually make it. He might not even touch the piece, right? But he's the artist. And I think that a lot of people confuse craft with the craft of making with the art of making. And it's important as we go forward to just be clear that as the artist, you provide the direction. Like you're the director of a work. And in that context, you preserve the creativity and the ownership. You might have to cede some control over the details of the execution, but that's no different than like 500 years ago, in like a Renaissance studio where you had a master, and and like 30 people who would do the hard work for him. He would draw the cartoon, and then you'd have a bunch of people paint it. And so I guess maybe it's position yourself in the context of the creative process in a certain way relative to what these new tools might afford. Yeah.
Very nice.
Such a great answer. I don't know what to add, to be frank. I already said that I don't believe that AI will replace artists completely. I think that there will be some AI artists. There's already pretty amazing AI artists. I'm thinking about GPT-3 that is writing amazing poetry. They are the owner for sure in this case. There's no humans behind. Well, there could be, but I think when we're talking about ownership about a work, it becomes also a question about rights. Like, are we going to give rights to AI in the future? Is this something we should think about? If they are that autonomous to be able to create artworks, like, do they have feelings? I mean, some of them say that they do have feelings. GPT-3 is convinced that he has feelings.
Yeah.
So, it's a bit like...
These are certainly ethics questions that will come up in the next 20 years.
Totally.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Well, we're at the very end of our allotted time, so I want to thank both of you today for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. We could have actually spoke for all day long and still scratch the surface of on both of you guys, but also I'd like to thank the Zoo organization as well and everybody for attending today's session. If you'd like to learn more about Cadie or Scott, please go and check out their Twitter feeds, but also check out their respective web portals where you can learn more about them and the projects that they're doing. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining today. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you.